Hello everybody, we have another rapid game against Alphase Smarome, rated 850. He opens up with the d4 pawn, controlling the center. We develop a knight, controlling the center. He develops his queen's knight. Um, Normally you want to put it behind the c pawn, not in front of it. But this is, Jobava London. It has its own thing. But this knight threatens e4. So I'm going to play d5 to prevent him from playing e4 and taking the whole center. So he does develop the bishop, Jobava London style, and his idea is to coordinate with the knight and fork me. I'm simply going to play a6. It's a weird move, but it entirely shuts down the Jobava London ideas. There's never this anymore. So now you could just play the rest of the game completely normal because a6 is inserted. And now he'll never have this coordination, so now you can easily play c5 without having to worry about that because a6 covers it. Okay, so anyway, he decides to make a pawn move that's not nearly as useful as mine. Mine has lots of purpose. His almost has no purpose other than maybe creating a square, but kind of slow for that. Anyway, we're happy to see it. We simply develop our bishop to its only available diagonal outside of the pawn chain because we want to play e6, but we don't want to block in our bishop. So he develops the knight towards the center, which makes sense. So now we just want to close our pawn chain, solidify our pawn chain, support the center, open up our bishop's diagonal. Now white plays a3. This also looks like a waste of time. I don't understand the purpose. This pin isn't particularly good or anything that he's trying to stop. But it's our turn. You could play something like bishop d6. You could play something like knight d7. But I'm keen on c5, opening up the position a little more, getting the knight to a little more active square, attacking the center right away. It's more aggressive than the other options I mentioned. And it attacks the center with a pawn. He cannot play c3 to defend the pawn because he put this knight here, which doesn't belong here. And now we can develop our knight behind it. And then afterwards, if we so want, we can always play bishop d6 or bishop e7. We don't have to trade the bishops. We can keep them on the board. But now we're putting pressure towards the center. So he relieves the pressure immediately and takes. If we just develop casually, he's going to try to defend the pawn, and we don't want to have to waste time trying to break that down. So let's just recapture immediately and develop at the same time. Now our bishops and knight look really nice. This knight's going to go here. So our development looks great. We have a pawn in the center and another pawn supporting. All good stuff. So white was playing, decent, good developing moves, but kind of bad with unnecessary pawn moves, but nothing like losing. But then he plays this move, which is kind of bad. Like if I just take the bishop, he has to take back. That creates this crazy weak diagonal that the queen will exploit. Terrible pawn structure once you take that way. Yeah, you can't push here probably, right? Because knight takes and bishop takes, queen takes, queen takes. But you definitely can do the other thing I said. So basically, we were doing normal stuff. We included a6. It's specific to the Jobava London. You don't have to play it. It's just how I like to play against it. It's just a simple way to stop knight b5. And now we played normal, develop, center. Normally we'd still continue with the knight first and then the castling if he did normal stuff. But because he did this, we're going to move the same piece twice. We're going to capture and just wreck his structure. And here the game is basically over once he does this. So even though material's even, the game's over. Because this pawn structure is basically that bad. So because these squares are super weak, these pawns are weak. The squares in front of the pawns are weak. Like if a knight were to get here, um, you know, it's going to be hard to get rid of piece that's sitting here. So now that we have a good long-term advantage in terms of pawn structure and so forth, now we can go back to the principles. We're just going to castle. You could also develop the knight, but getting your king away from all checks can never be bad. Checks are probably one of the biggest reasons for blundering tactics. That's why you usually start the moves, your candidate moves, with checks, captures, threats. So we have an amazing position, and white decides. Now this bishop, like, look at this, it can never get out. He has to do something like this. He should have done something like g4. I move my bishop, and then he develops his bishop and tries to castle, right? Something like that. But instead he moves his queen. This doesn't threaten anything. It's a bad move, and it directly walks into the obvious developing move of knight c6. So now we get to go knight c6 for free, so it's even stronger than normal. And he just has to move his queen again. Maybe he wants to attack my king. I don't know if that's his idea, but there's no attack to be had. And now I'm just getting free development. So no, he moves his queen this way, but this is a terrible move because it doesn't threaten anything, and you can't challenge an entire army with your queen, right? So what are some developing moves that we would normally want to make? Rook c8, but now it comes with discoveries, right? So your queen doesn't belong here. So, you know, other moves you may be normally considering, like maybe you wanted to play h6 and create some space for your king and your bishop. Maybe you wanted to jump your knight in, right? Maybe you wanted to push in the center, which is, you know, an awesome move. Like, I really like the push in the center, but because he put his queen here, I'm still gonna start with rook c8 just because this opens up new possibilities for me. And it's for free, like half for free, because his queen really should move again if he doesn't want me to have discoveries the entire game that could potentially just win. So he long castles. Kind of makes sense. I also wanted to point out that I did go rook c8, but I didn't mention this pawn is hanging, but I don't care about this pawn. As far as I'm concerned, my position's already winning, statically speaking, pawn structure, long-term advantage-wise. So I don't need a pawn because I already have my win condition. So now I just want to develop. So he long castles. His queen is still here, so I'm just gonna take advantage of that and improve my, like normally I would take the center or develop, but I'm gonna improve this knight for free by going to the center. And now my knight's hanging, but I don't want to improve it to the center. I want to improve it to c4 for free. So all in one. Ooh, that wasn't it. So all in one turn, basically my idea is I move the knight. He has to move the queen, so because it's hanging, right? Maybe it's almost trapped actually, but he does have squares. Although, wait, is the queen trapped? No, it can go to a7 at the very least. Still suspicious though, but anyway, I expect him to move his queen, and then I was going to put maybe my knight on c4, and then sack it on a3, because when he takes, I can take the rook, I mean the knight, which would be undefended. But he doesn't do that. He completely just zooms in on my knight and completely forgets the fact his queen is hanging. So now that's that. We won a queen. He doesn't resign. Now he's just jettisoning more material. This is attacked 3 times, but because of a pin, only 2 really matter. It's only defended once though, so you don't even need the queen. It doesn't matter that it's pinned. So let's just take it. Free stuff. Now that he lost his queen, he's just, you know, molding. He's just gonna throw everything at me and for free. So he moves his knight away this comes with an attack on the rook. There are so many winning moves here. It's so ridiculous. Like, just queen anywhere is probably winning. Pushing this pawn, knight in here. I'm just gonna sack my rook without any calculation because I don't care. I'm up 8 points of material. Even if this is terrible and doesn't work, I'll still be at 3 points of material. And at the very least, I mean, look at this alignment. I can immediately get a rook exchange. I can immediately give a check and pick up a piece. So like, all right, let's just do that. Let's just pick up this knight. He could retreat it. We still pick it up. And so whatever. I sack the rook for a knight and a pawn. So I gave up 1 point of material, but I opened his king. I took out his only piece in the center, right? And his position, these guys never moving. This guy's on the rim. He goes back into the diagonal. I'm sure we have discoveries, but I'm just going to take the piece, throw the rook here, keep it simple. Who cares? Unless there's a checkmate, which there might be. So this is a double check. I guess we should have the rook here first so he can't go this way, and then we'll calculate, see if there's a checkmate. But look at the center, as I like to do. I point to these 4 squares. Who has control over the high ground? We do. So he pushes the pawn. He finally gets his bishop out. I'm just going to ignore it, develop our last piece to its most obvious square. If you're not considering rook c8, if you were considering moving it anywhere else, we need to discuss rooks, basically, and how they operate. So he moves his knight back. He provides a little shelter to his king, but at the same time, it's just hanging, right? So now we get to take it with a double check, which means he can't even capture back, because all double checks require king moves as a response. So he has to move his king. He can. This is the only real square, a1. But the game's over, right? We take his rook, checks. I mean, this is a checkmate actually. Queen takes b2 is a checkmate. And that's the end of this game. He played pretty well. I was going to say pretty well, but he did not play pretty well. He played pretty poorly. These 2 pawn moves, completely unnecessary. He could have used those 2 moves getting his bishop out, right? It wouldn't be stuck. Maybe it could have been defending somewhere. And if that's the case, his rook would also be protecting the back rank. It could capture the knight. So these moves, if you make them, you really have to be able to tell someone why. If they say, why did you do that? You have to be able to answer them. Okay, my opponent left the game. I can claim victory in 10 seconds. Now, I did play a6, but I'll show you after, what my idea is, exactly why. I'm going to claim victory. Okay. And let's go through the game. So we have development and center. And now, normally you see me play c5 a lot against these d4 openings, but when they put their knight here, if you play c5, they can kind of play e4. And things become weird. So I definitely don't like that. I much prefer to just play d5, because you can always play c5 whenever you want. I only do it on move 2 a lot to confuse the opponent. It's sharp, etc. But I don't want him to take the center. Like when I play c5, e4 is never really like a response. Here it is, so I play d5 to stop him from playing e4, which is the one benefit of putting your knight in front of your c-pawn. But now that I did this, that's stopped. And so the only other idea white has is to go knight b5 and do this. Now a lot of players, they do something like c6, right? Saying, oh, I defend the center and protect the square, but c6 takes away the square from your knight, so your knight's going to be less active in that position. Also, if you have your pawn on c6 defending this square, that means you don't have it on c5 attacking the center, so that's another drawback, more passivity that white doesn't have to, respond to. So usually if you choose the c6 option, you end up pushing the a pawn too. I like to go in reverse. I choose the a6 option, which protects the square, and then push the c pawn too, because the c pawn attacks the center. So if you just develop casually here like this, let me go to an analysis board. If you just develop casually like this, and he goes knight b5, now you can't defend this. You have to play something like this. It's like the reverse fried liver. And black is already super happy and doing awesome / winning. So when he goes here, you basically can't fall for knight b5. So I just play a6. There are other ways to play this. You can just develop your bishop, and when he goes here, you can always put your knight on a6 defending that way, but I don't see the reason to tie up and do weird stuff. a6 is an extremely useful move in tons of positions as black, for the specific reason that it controls the square from the knight and bishop, which oftentimes can do some real damage on that square. So anyway, as soon as I include this move, which is prophylaxis and stops my opponent's entire, not just idea, but his setup, because what else, if the knight's not going to support a pawn push or go here, this is never a thing, right? Knight attacking pawn, this is never real pressure, because the only time that it ever is when the c pawn is in front of the knight, adding to the pressure. So his knight has no life here. So now we can continue. Development, center. Center, development. Center, and absolutely development. Moving the c pawn ensures the knight can get to c6, which is its best, most natural, and most effective active square. Development, center. And now just a blunder by my opponent, not as in material, but a positional blunder nonetheless. And that's all you need to win the game. That right there wins you the game. You don't need material. You don't need checkmate. That right there wins you the game. You need to not blunder for the rest of the game. King safety. Development, center for free. Development kind of for free. Because if you don't move the queen, then I have discoveries like I had in the game. So it's kind of for free. You may be able to keep it here and move by move it works out, but that's always so scary. Okay, and now just forcing move, threat, tactics, he blunders a queen. So that's it. We made one a6 move, which I explained thoroughly. It's specifically against the Jobava London. Everything else was center, development, king safety, and he blundered. Game over. So that's that. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully if someone tries the Jobava London against you, you go d4 on move 2, you stop their e pawn advance, you play a6 knowing that in the future you're going to play c5, and you're done. You develop your pieces, that's your setup, you can go from there. Now you have that for the rest of your chess life. It's good. It's good to have setups against stuff. Anyway, good luck in your chess. Submit your rapid games in my Discord, link in the description. Please like, comment. Goodbye.